Hey, good morning, everybody. Yeah, it's about 7:34 on this Sunday, and I wanted to come on here, and this is the first time, well, actually the second time, but my first time on my, actually my second time using my new GoPro 7 Black to do a video in 4K at 60 frames per second. And as you can see, apparently the video makes it look a lot better, the view and everything. But I wanted to come on here because, as we go through this situation right now, a lot of us take time to relax, get things taken care of, get things done. And more importantly, one of the things that we do is we like to discover some new things. Now, for me, I've always heard about emulators, how you can play them on your phone, your computer, you name it. The only problem with me is I've never really been sure about emulators. Now I understand basically by watching and subscribing to channels like Rerez and Cinemassacre and JonTron and a few others that emulators basically are just devices on your phone, physical console devices, cartridges that allow you to play a multitude of games that you can't play anymore, or basically are not available for physical release. Unless you have a virtual console, and some of these are hard to come by when it comes to that. But, on the other hand, you also have, like I said, the games themselves. That's what I was trying to allude to. Like I said, it's early. But the games themselves. And the games themselves are basically one thing that surprised me when I watched, like I said, Rerez and JonTron and a few others. The one thing that surprised me about, and I am doing this unscripted, uncut, and on the fly. The one thing that surprised me about these games when they get when people download and emulate them onto the phones or the get other consoles or whatever, is how small they are. Now there are a few exceptions, unless you have a powerful system like a cartridge meant for these kind of games. There are exceptions, and those are what's known as the MAME, the MAME. Now, I'm not doubting that these don't work because they do. I mean, people like, James Wolfe, the AVGN, Chris Neo, Irate Gamer, Rerez, for example. A lot of them, JonTron, a lot of them wouldn't be talking about all these arcade games if the emulations for them weren't playable. They are. It just depends all on the system or the app. I've tried various apps, and none of them seem to work. I mean, they acknowledge the existence of the game by the file it's in, but they don't work. My only thought process is you gotta have it on a more powerful system like a computer. Now, with that said, you know, like I mentioned at the beginning, we're all going through this situation to where it gives us time to kind of discover things that are new, things that we wouldn't even consider. And so far, when it comes to emulation, I've actually taken the opportunity to do this. Now, a little bit of history, it's not my first time actually dealing with emulation. It's not. As a matter of fact, back when we lived on Thoroughbred Street in Patterson, California, with my old beast of a computer, tube, monitor, and everything, I actually downloaded the first Sally hack, the first Sally Acorn hack in a Sonic the Hedgehog game. That's right. Long story short, move these guys aside. Somebody actually took this character and hacked her into Sonic 1 and 2. They actually did. But she wasn't the only character. Recently, people did the same thing with Bunny Rabbit. And I think the reason fans of Sonic Sat AM did this and the Archie Sonic did this is to and overall franchise itself with Sonic the Hedgehog is to send a message of, potentially what, Sega had on their hands, like what they could have done had they decided to bring in these characters. And there's still a lot of speculation going around that someday, somehow, these characters will arrive in a game, but we don't know when that will be. But here's the thing. I bring these hacks up because they are playable. Now it all depends on the system you have, but they are playable. Or the app or the emulator app or system you have, but they are playable. For example, these four apps here, the ones right at the corner, I don't know if you can see that, but these right here, this one, and this one, all play, the games that I have. Like, for example, NES Emulation, well, it's everything it is. It's NES. It allows me to play all the NES and Famicom games, even this one. Yeah, that's Transformers Mystery of Optimus Prime, a Japanese Famicom game that never made it out here to release. James covered that in a Cinemassacre AVGN episode long ago. But as you also saw, you had Kung Fu and Ninja Turtles 2, the Ultra Games version of the arcade game. But what's funny now that I bring up Kung Fu, like I said, you could play some hacks on here too. One of the hacks is a He-Man version, He-Man Masters of the Universe hack of Kung Fu. It's interesting. It's really interesting. Now, one of the things I have discovered about these emulation apps where you can play the games is some of them do come with the games listed, but you have to download them. Some are just the app console itself. In other words, it's there so you can play the games you've already downloaded. Now, they're not the only, like I said, it's not the only one. Like right here, I have what's known as Retro Game Center. And this is an example of what I'm talking about. There are games already on there, but you have to download them. Like Tecmo Bowl, Super Sprint, Terminator 2. There's a lot, WWF WrestleMania. They're all on here, and all you have to do is download them. But if you go to Play Now, look at that. You get a whole listing of games. And this plays basically every system, apparently, except for a few certain items. Like here, we have Sally Acorn, the Sally Acorn app I mentioned in Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog 2, that is. It acknowledges the platform and everything, or the console and everything it's a part of. Like Nintendo, Sega, Ninja Turtle, Nintendo, Game Boy, and Sega. So they acknowledge it. Now, the reason I bring that up is because of the fact that the other hack that I mentioned, the Bunny Rabbit one, is not listed, even though it should be. And that's what's interesting. Because, again, you can play. Game, they have a stop button right there, so you can play it. So you can play it. Now, the Game Boy one, of course, has been talked about on sites like my old boy, I'd say, has been talked about on channels like Rerez and all that when they've talked about this stuff. And even though it lists a lot of the games I've downloaded, excuse me there, the only game it'll play is right there. Because it's a Game Boy game. It's a Game Boy emulator. The next one we have is SNES NXEX. In other words, Super Nintendo, Super Famicom. And as you can tell, it plays mostly Super Nintendo games like WrestleMania, and one that, again, AVGN talked about, the Godzilla game. This is the Godzilla game, the fighter game that was promised in the NES magazine long ago for the Super Nintendo, but only came out in Japan. Now, excuse me. Now again, Super WrestleMania and the Godzilla game. Now the Godzilla one is a Super Famicom game. So just like with the NES emulator, there you go. And then you get to Super MD, which is for Mega Drive. And I just lost the game there. Now watch. This is what I'm talking about by this being able to do the Sally one and the Bunny one. Watch. Pretty cool, huh? So it shows you that you can actually do hacks in this, actually play mods, hacks of other games with different characters, sprites, if you will, on that system, on that thing. The other thing I just discovered as well when it comes to emulation, while watching channels like Rerez and JonTron and many of them, is you have a variety of controllers that are available that are wireless. Like 8-Bit Duo, which I'm looking into, especially for that, the Sonic games, if you will, or the Sonic hack games, if you will, as well as the Nintendo ones, which would allow me to have better control with the Nintendo games. But there's something else that I discovered, and I looked online about this, and I'm surprised Rerez, Cinemassacre, JonTron, or any of them didn't mention this. You can actually pair your PlayStation 4, your Xbox One, and one of your Joy-Cons from your Nintendo Switch to your phone so you can play the games. Yeah, you can actually pair those controllers, the Joy-Con, the PS4 controller, and the Xbox One controller. Now I find that interesting. Now I recently went online to Amazon and bought myself a controller that's meant specifically for the Android. That way I don't have to keep, pairing these and possibly lose a connection to my consoles. But it also allowed me to probably discover if maybe an Android Pacific controller will allow me to play these kind of games, because there are specific mechanisms with these games that you need to have control of certain buttons. Like with Bunny and possibly Sally, they're hacks in both Sonic games. The A button controls with Sally a laser that comes out of her portable computer, Nicole. Well, Bunny, she's half robotic, her cyborg arm extends, and you need to press the A button. Unfortunately, when you try to press what's the equivalent of an A button, right here, like the X button or whatever, it's not possible. You can't do it. It won't let you do it. So you need something like the 8-Bit Duo or something like an Android Pacific controller to do that. So let's see what happens. I'm probably still going to get the 8-Bit Duo controller as well, so I can have something on the side just in case these kind of things come up. But the biggest question I think anybody has when it comes to emulation, ladies and gentlemen, is, should it exist? Should it be around? I mean, I've heard the guys at Rerez, more specifically, I don't know what his name is, Scott or something like that, Rerez, I think that's his name. I've heard them basically say, or Sean at Rerez, I think that's the name, Sean. I've heard them talk about, with these kind of things, that it's kind of illegal. Now, that's true in a sense. But if they were illegal, why are they why are they free to download? I'll tell you why. Because these games, whether they're straight up arcade games, the Sega Genesis games, TurboGrafx games, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Famicom, Super Famicom, N64, Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, these are games that even though they're licensed under a certain distributor, like Sega or Nintendo or Hudson Soft or whatever, these are the kind of games that really is not the focus of those companies anymore. That the ones that are the focus of those companies are the games of now. Which is why, heck, which is why I find it funny when Sean, I think that's his name again, but no, Shane, that's the name, sorry, but it's kind of funny when I heard Shane talk about this during one of his video reviews of a third-party game system. I think it was the BitBoy or something or whatever. It was he basically. I don't know if it was the BitBoy or it was the steering wheel game console, but basically he talked about the fact that he found it funny and amusing that some companies like touchplayer.com would not only add their website name to the start of every game, and as well as add an additional loading game or loading scene, which wasn't necessary. But I find it funny that he talked about the fact that one of the things he found intriguing was the fact that there was no reason for these people that were already taking this game and selling it or making it and selling it as a part of this system. There was no need for them to even pirate or change things up or edit things up because Nintendo and Sega and all of them are not focusing on that stuff anymore. They're focusing on the here and the now. But he found it amusing because apparently to him, from what he can tell, even with games from the past, the people who got behind some of those consoles he talked about, worse consoles and all that, maybe some of them in his mind are still kind of fearful. And which he kind of thinks, in my opinion, from what I heard, it shouldn't really matter because Nintendo's not even thinking about that stuff, or Sega's not even thinking about that stuff. Which is why, when you look at a lot of these hacks out there of He-Man and Kung Fu from NES, Sally Acorn and Bunny Rabbit and the Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2 games, and many others. Heck, what's funny is when Shane did the review of, what was it, the Cool Babies, this Cool Baby and Cool Baby 2, he talked about the fact that there was a lot of games that were hacks with Mario in it. And there were some Mario games that were hacks that looked like they came out of a nightmare or out of the Twilight Zone. The truth is, when you get down to it, ladies and gentlemen, when you get really down to it, Shane has a point. Nintendo and Sega and all of them are not focused on the stuff anymore. They're focused primarily on the here and the now. Now, is there a chance that, they know about these emulations? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely they know about them. There's no doubt. But I think the reason they don't go after people about it is because pretty much they know that the more these are emulated, the more people download them, the more people are going to enjoy them. And it gets people to want to see the official copy in some capacity. That's why the SNES Classic and the NES Classic came out. That's why Sega brought out the Sega Mini. That's why TurboGrafx has brought out the Turbo Mini. All because they know people want to see these in a more official capacity because they know even with emulation, there's going to be problems. There's going to be slowdowns, there's going to be glitches, there's going to be crashes. So what better way to, quench that thirst of those people that do that than to let them see the official product in the official way or in some kind of official capacity. The point that I'm getting at is this. During this time, a lot of us are discovering a lot of things that we would be hesitant to discover. And for me, emulation is a new thing. Now, is it difficult when it comes to the on-touchpad control, on-screen touch screen? Is it hard, I should say, when it comes to playing the games with touchpad controllers, in other words, on-screen touchscreen controllers? Oh, absolutely. But I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that at least they're trying to mimic, even through touchscreen, what a controller on a Sega Genesis, a Super Nintendo, a Game Boy, and a Nintendo are like. So I'll give them that. I will give them that. But the point and the fact that I'm getting at, folks, is this. When I look at emulation, is it something that needs to be around? Not really. But is it something to feed nostalgia? Absolutely. And if what Shane at Rerez said is true, and probably others feeling the same way, that Nintendo really doesn't care that much about these games anymore, with a few exceptions, then it's not really much of a problem. I mean, if publishers and companies like Nintendo and Sega were upset about this, sites like EmulationGames.net and many others like them would not be around. They would not be around. Now, does EmulationGames.net have a lot to still learn and fix? Absolutely. There are downloads, ROMs of games that don't even play when you try to put them on emulation unless you have a certain system. So yeah, even EmulationGames.net has a lot to learn. And in the end, when you think about it, with all that said, in this time of change and all that, does it really matter if people download games onto the phones or onto a SD card and play it on a cartridge on a Super Nintendo or Nintendo? Does it really matter? No, it doesn't. And what's great about this is the games sound crisp and clear no matter how you play them. They do. But for me, it's a new thing. Like I said on DeviantArt when I submitted a picture from here on my GoPro saying I'm getting used to this, it's kind of a new thing. Emulation is going to be the same way. I'm just going to have to get used to how to play these things, but hopefully I'll have the mechanisms and the controllers laid out as time goes on. But what do you guys think? What are your thoughts on emulation as a whole? How do you feel about it? Do you think companies like Nintendo and Sega and many of them are kind of upset about it being around? Or do you think they're cool with it? Do you think they're all right with it? Because when you think about it, you have all these different other consoles that basically play cartridge games, but not necessarily. Some do, like Analog has brought out a couple of retro systems that are HDMI compatible and basically play the games as if they were being played on the original system. But others, like say the Retron series, and even the Retron series, like the Retron 5 or the Retron 77, basically you can basically, when you play the game, you have to have the cartridge in there, but all it's doing, just like, let's say, what was it he talked about? What was that one that you put your phone in? Can't think of the name right now. But Shane talked about a system that Hyperlink brought out where you could put your phone into the little mini console they created, and have a Game Boy. But anyway, basically, there are those consoles, like I said, the Retron 5, the Retron 77, and even that one, I think it's a Super Game Boy. I can't think of his name right now. But they were basically, you have to have the games in there to play them, but all they're doing is ripping off the files so you can play them. So all it's doing is ripping the files into a ROM, and that's it. That's why you get a crisper look. Now, here's the thing. Again, like I said, is Nintendo and Sega and all them aware of this? Absolutely. But I don't think it really matters to them, because what they're really looking at is the bottom dollar of what they're doing today. And like I said, you take a look at, things like Analog and AVGN, and they're bringing out all these accessories and consoles to play these old games. Whether it's by using the original cartridge and ripping the file off of it into a ROM, or straight up using the cartridge, or providing the cartridges that you can put an SD card in so you can play these ROMs. If Nintendo and Sega were upset about this, they would have shut this down long ago. They would have. They would have shut it down long ago, but they're not. So to me, when I look at emulation, in today's day and world, all that matters to Sega and Nintendo is the bottom dollar and what they're doing today. Same with Microsoft and Sony. But in the end, like I said, for me, just like my GoPro here, it's something I'm going to have to get used to and learn. Because you know what? When I'm at break or I'm on lunch and it's not nice outside, or, can't do any kind of video during lunch or anything, then the best thing for me to do, quite honestly, play a game. And that's what this does. So anyway though, I thought I'd just come on here, and I know I sound like I rambled and everything. I do apologize. It is early. It's about 8 now, or 8:01. But I wanted to come on here, just giving you my thoughts in general about emulation. Kind of let you know that I'm starting to play I'm starting to get into it a little bit, starting to learn it. I have a controller on the way and probably have another one down the line coming. So yeah, I just thought I'd let you know about my journey now into my start with emulation, and basically give you my thoughts on it in general, and even bring up a few things about emulation when it comes to controllers that maybe some of you didn't know. So thought I'd just let you guys know about that. I know this video went on longer than it should, but thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will talk to y'all later. God bless. Take care.